What if the biggest threat to Unrivaled wasn't criticism, but silence? When the league launched, it promised something bold: elite women's basketball, premium presentation, and a fresh alternative during the WNBA offseason. Investors bought in. Fans were curious. The vision felt modern, confident, and perfectly timed. But now that early optimism is running into uncomfortable questions. Viewership numbers are sliding. Buzz feels quieter. And behind the scenes, reports and reactions are starting to raise eyebrows. This isn't about one bad game or one slow night. It's about whether the foundation was strong enough to survive year 2 pressure. In sports, perception matters almost as much as performance. And when momentum stalls, confidence can disappear faster than expected. The real story here isn't collapse, it's uncertainty. And uncertainty is where leagues either adapt quickly or fall behind without realizing it. Support the channel by liking this video, subscribing, and turning on notifications. At the beginning, Unrivaled didn't feel risky at all. It felt inevitable. The pitch was clean, confident, and perfectly timed. A high-level women's basketball league built specifically for the WNBA offseason. No overseas grind, no long travel stretches, better pay, better accommodations. A modern presentation designed for TV and social media. On paper, it checked every box players and investors had been talking about for years. That's why the money came in fast. Major backers didn't just see basketball, they saw a gap in the market. The WNBA was growing, stars were becoming more recognizable, and fans were clearly hungry for more content outside the regular season. Unrivaled positioned itself as the solution, not a competitor, but a complement. A league that would elevate players without stepping on the WNBA's calendar. That framing mattered. The early messaging leaned heavily on empowerment and innovation. Shorter games, a 3-on-3 format built for pace, star-heavy rosters that guaranteed recognizable names on the floor at all times. It wasn't trying to replicate traditional basketball culture. It was selling something faster, louder, and more digestible for casual viewers. And for a moment, that strategy worked. Opening nights felt buzzy. Social media clips circulated. The league looked polished, intentional, and serious about longevity. Players bought into the vision too. The idea of staying stateside, earning competitive money, and avoiding exhausting overseas seasons was appealing. Some fans saw Unrivaled as a sign of progress, proof that women's basketball was finally expanding beyond survival mode. The league wasn't asking for patience. It was promising immediate value. But here, where things quietly shifted, big promises create big expectations. When you position yourself as premium from day one, you don't get the luxury of slow growth. Every broadcast, every attendance number, every ratings report becomes a referendum on the entire concept. There's less room to experiment, less tolerance for dips. Momentum isn't optional, it's required. That pressure doesn't show up right away, it creeps in. A slightly smaller audience here, less online chatter there. Questions that start as whispers. Is the format connecting? Are fans sticking around? Are stars enough on their own? And once those questions start circulating, perception can change faster than reality. Unrivaled didn't fail out of the gate, but the honeymoon phase ended quicker than many expected. And what came next would test whether the original promise was built for excitement or for endurance. The first real warning didn't come from critics. It came from the quiet places that don't spin narratives, rating sheets, attendance reports, and network expectations. Early broadcasts were supposed to stabilize. Instead, they wobbled. Viewership dipped below projections, then slipped again. Games featuring some of the league's most recognizable names struggled to hold casual audiences. And once those numbers became public, the conversation shifted fast. This wasn't about effort on the court. The product itself wasn't broken in an obvious way. The pace was there. The talent was undeniable. But 3-on-3 basketball, especially at a professional level, asks fans to rewire how they watch the game. Defensive schemes look different. Flow feels unfamiliar. For hardcore fans, that adjustment can be interesting. For casual viewers, it can feel disconnected. and casual viewers are the audience networks care about most. Then came the comparisons. Not fair ones, but inevitable ones. Clips from Unrivaled broadcasts were being stacked against WNBA games airing months later. Fans began asking why one product felt electric, while the other felt optional. Some believed the league leaned too heavily on star power without building emotional stakes. Others argued the schedule worked against it, landing in windows crowded with established sports habits. What raised eyebrows wasn't just low numbers, it was inconsistency. One night might show promise, the next would crater. That volatility makes executives nervous. Networks don't just want peaks, they want predictability. Advertisers want reliability. When ratings swing too wildly, confidence erodes behind the scenes long before public statements change tone. This is where speculation started creeping in. Reports suggested internal conversations were becoming more cautious. Some fans believed network partners expected quicker returns given the size of the initial investment. Others pointed out that premium production costs don't scale down easily when audiences don't scale up. Nothing was confirmed publicly, but the energy shifted. Optimism turned into analysis. Analysis turned into concern. The league's leadership continued projecting patience, emphasizing long-term growth and foundational seasons. That messaging isn't wrong, leagues aren't built overnight. But patience sounds different when millions are already committed, especially when alternatives exist, especially when the media landscape is shrinking, not expanding. And then one question began floating louder than the rest. If even established, award-winning sports properties aren't immune to cuts, how long does a new league really get? And that's when the pressure stopped being theoretical and started feeling very real. At first, the strategy felt obvious. Load the league with recognizable names and the audience will follow. On paper, it made sense. Big stars draw eyeballs. They always have. But reality pushed back harder than expected. Games featuring headline players didn't spike the way projections assumed they would. In some cases, viewership barely moved at all. That's when uncomfortable questions started circulating. Was star power being overestimated? Or was it being deployed the wrong way? Some fans argued that putting multiple marquee players on the same roster diluted intrigue instead of amplifying it. Rivalries never had time to form. There was no slow burn, no reason to pick sides. Without friction, attention drifted. Others pointed to timing. Many of these stars were coming off exhausting seasons. Some were returning from injuries. The intensity wasn't always playoff level and viewers noticed. Fair or not, perception matters. Casual fans don't tune in for context. They tune in for moments. When those moments didn't arrive consistently, patience wore thin. Then came the online debates. Clips circulated with captions questioning effort, urgency, and competitiveness. Those takes weren't always accurate, but they spread fast. Once that narrative takes hold, it's hard to reverse, especially when highlight culture rewards extremes, not nuance. There was also confusion around identity. Was this league supposed to feel like a showcase, a proving ground, a serious competitor? Different audiences answered differently, and that fractured the message. Without a clear emotional hook, even big names struggled to carry sustained interest. Some fans believe expectations were inflated by early hype. Others think the league underestimated how much storytelling matters alongside talent. Reports claim internal discussions started shifting toward recalibrating presentation and scheduling, though nothing official has been confirmed. What's clear is this: star power alone didn't create stability, it created curiosity, and curiosity without structure fades quickly. And once that realization set in, the spotlight moved away from the players and straight toward the people funding the vision. The moment the ratings became public, the conversation changed. Quiet optimism gave way to open concern. Viewership wasn't just underwhelming, it was inconsistent. One night showed promise, the next fell flat. For networks and investors, inconsistency is almost worse than low numbers. It makes planning impossible. Reports highlighted steep drop-offs after opening windows. Early curiosity didn't convert into routine watching. That's a red flag in sports media. Loyal audiences build habits. They show up even when the matchup isn't perfect. Here, many didn't come back. That's when comparisons started flying. Fans and analysts stacked the numbers against other women's basketball properties. The gap was uncomfortable. Some believed marketing missed its target. Others felt the format never fully translated to television. Short games, fast pace, limited stakes, exciting in theory, but difficult to anchor emotionally. There was also the network factor. Being split across multiple channels fractured discovery. Casual viewers couldn't always find the games. When access isn't simple, attention moves on. It always does. Online chatter grew sharper. Comment sections filled with speculation about contract clauses and exit options. Rumors suggest network executives began reviewing long-term value much earlier than expected. No confirmations, but the tone shifted. Numbers don't care about intention. They don't reward potential. They only reflect behavior, and what they reflected raised eyebrows. Because once the data tells a story, it's no longer about patience, it's about risk. What viewers didn't see was the internal balancing act happening off-camera. As public debate heated up, sources close to the situation described a growing divide between optimism and urgency. On the surface, everything looked calm, but behind closed doors, expectations were being reassessed. Some insiders believed the league needed more time to breathe. Building an audience doesn't happen overnight. Others weren't so patient. Broadcast partners operate on timelines, not promises. If momentum stalls early, confidence erodes fast. That's when subtle shifts began. Fewer promotional pushes, less aggressive scheduling. Small changes most fans wouldn't notice, but they mattered. When support softens quietly, it often signals deeper concerns. Players felt it too, not through official statements but through energy. Media availability tightened. Messaging became more careful. Nobody wanted to say the wrong thing while negotiations were still fluid. One misplaced quote could tilt public perception instantly. Fans picked up on the mood change. Some believed leadership wasn't fully aligned. Others felt the vision was still there, just poorly communicated. Reports claim internal meetings grew more frequent, focusing less on growth and more on sustainability. And that's a critical difference. Growth is about ambition. Sustainability is about survival. When that shift happens early, it changes everything. Because once a project starts asking how long it can last instead of how big it can become, the pressure becomes very real. The conversation didn't change overnight. It drifted. At first, the headlines were still positive. Milestones, viewership bumps, social clips going viral. But the tone underneath began to feel different. Less excitement, more qualifiers. Phrases like long-term potential quietly replaced breakthrough moment. That shift matters. Because once media framing cools, fans follow. Not all at once, slowly. Some supporters doubled down, defending the league louder than ever. Others started asking tougher questions. Why weren't certain players being pushed more? Why did some matchups feel underpromoted? Why did the spotlight keep moving? That's where the tension sharpened. Veterans reportedly felt overlooked, believing their consistency was being traded for short-term buzz. Meanwhile, newer faces were suddenly everywhere: ads, interviews, highlight packages. Some fans loved it, others called it forced. The debate wasn't about talent anymore. It was about balance. And balance is hard when growth is uneven. Social media amplified everything. One clipped quote sparked days of argument. A referee decision turned into a league-wide controversy. Even neutral moments were interpreted as signals. Some fans believed the league was listening. Others felt it was reacting, not leading. Rumors suggest internal discussions grew more cautious. Not panicked, but careful. Messaging tightened further. Players were encouraged to focus on the game. Let the noise pass. But the noise didn't fade, it multiplied. Because controversy feeds curiosity. And curiosity feeds clicks. The problem, clicks don't always translate to trust. When fans feel like narratives are being shaped instead of told, skepticism grows. Every move is questioned. Every silence feels intentional. Every change feels strategic. That's when momentum becomes fragile. Not because interest disappears, but because belief wavers. And belief is what turns casual viewers into loyal ones. As one debate cooled, another immediately replaced it. Different names, same arguments. The cycle kept spinning faster each week. And just when it seemed like things might stabilize, something unexpected reignited everything. It wasn't a buzzer beater. It wasn't a championship parade. It was quieter than that, and somehow louder at the same time. A single decision. When it happened, reactions split instantly. Some fans called it overdue. Others said it raised eyebrows. And within hours, the conversation stopped being about basketball and started being about intent. Why now? That question echoed everywhere. Analysts tiptoed around it. Players answered carefully. The league stayed measured. But online, speculation ran wild. Some fans believed the move signaled a shift in priorities. Others argued it exposed tensions that had been simmering all season. Nothing was officially confirmed, but patterns were noticed. Certain players suddenly went silent on social media. Others became more vocal. A few comments, vague, indirect, were read 100 different ways. Supporters dissected every word, every emoji, every pause. It wasn't what was said. It was what wasn't. That's when trust started to fracture. Not for everyone, but enough to matter. Veterans questioned whether consistency still mattered. Newer stars were asked to represent more than their on-court performance. Media outlets framed the moment as necessary growth. Critics called it rushed. Both sides claimed to care about the league's future. And maybe they did. But the divide was real. What made it worse was timing. Coming off a stretch of rising attention, the decision felt abrupt, like a gear change mid-drive. Fans who had just settled into the season suddenly felt disoriented. Momentum stalled. Not because people stopped watching, but because they started watching differently. Less celebration, more suspicion. Every game became evidence for one side or the other. The league didn't collapse, it didn't explode either. It hovered. And in that uneasy space, one truth became clear. Growth brings pressure, and pressure reveals cracks. The audience wasn't just watching the games anymore. They were watching the league itself. And the next chapter would determine whether that divide closed or widened even further. By now, it was impossible to ignore the bigger picture. What started as a ratings issue had become a full-scale reckoning for Unrivaled. Network executives were watching closely. Investors were second-guessing, and the league's leadership faced questions they hadn't anticipated. The numbers told a story that couldn't be spun. Opening day viewership had cratered to barely 32,000 in some cases. Week-to-week averages were slipping. Comparisons to the inaugural season, when excitement had driven sold-out crowds, were brutal. And the harsh reality: if trends continued, the league risked losing its broadcast partners entirely. Meanwhile, the players were carrying weight far beyond the court. Stars like Paige Beckers and Cameron Brink were supposed to be drawing eyes and energizing fans. Instead, they faced scrutiny for numbers that weren't entirely in their control. The pressure was real, and the spotlight was unforgiving. Rumors suggested the chairman and CEO of TNT Sports might be ready to exit the deal. Some fans believed this signaled an impending shakeup, while others speculated about behind-the-scenes negotiations to salvage the league. Official statements remained vague. emphasizing long-term growth and patience, but the uncertainty hung over every decision. Amid all this, the audience's role had changed. Fans weren't just passive viewers anymore. They were critics, analysts, and judges. Ticket sales, live streams, and social chatter became proof points. And in the court of public opinion, momentum had its own gravity. Once lost, it was nearly impossible to regain. The choice facing Unrivaled was stark. Double down on promotion, invest in stability, and hope for a rebound, or risk losing credibility, partners, and the very fans they were trying to court. The coming months would reveal whether the league could adapt fast enough to survive, and whether a new model for women's basketball could truly take root. And in the high-stakes game off the court, every misstep had consequences that went far beyond wins and losses. Despite the chaos, there were glimmers of hope. The league had options, but timing was everything. Reports claimed that Unrivaled was exploring new partnerships, including potential streaming deals on platforms like YouTube or Keep the Vision. This could bypass traditional networks entirely, reaching fans directly and reigniting interest. Some analysts suggested that leaning into digital-first experiences, live Q and As, behind-the-scenes access, interactive fan polls, could rebuild engagement faster than conventional TV. On the court, players like Paige Beckers and Cameron Brink remained critical to the league's image. Rumors suggested additional star signings were being considered, creating anticipation and drawing curiosity from casual fans. If managed right, these moves could generate buzz that translates into viewership. Meanwhile, the league needed to address perception issues. Inflated sold-out claims and mismanaged promotions had eroded credibility. Correcting these would be as vital as recruiting new stars. Financial pressure was mounting. With broadcast contracts in jeopardy, every decision mattered. Sponsors weren't just evaluating the product. They were measuring stability and potential return. Analysts noted that strategic investments now could prevent long-term collapse, but missteps would accelerate the decline. The fanbase, meanwhile, had grown more vocal. Social media chatter, forums, and live stream comments weren't just feedback, they were influence points. A single viral critique could amplify uncertainty, while a successful engagement campaign could restore momentum. The league had to operate with precision, balancing short-term fixes with long-term strategy. And what happened next caught everyone off guard. Unrivaled's struggle wasn't just a business story, it was a cultural one. A failure here could send ripples across women's sports, affecting sponsorship, media coverage, and fan interest beyond the WNBA. Conversely, a successful turnaround could set a precedent for alternative leagues, showing that women's basketball could innovate and thrive outside traditional structures. Players, fans, and executives alike were watching closely. Each choice, each announcement, each broadcast carried weight far beyond the scoreboard. The league's next moves wouldn't just determine survival, they could redefine the future of women's basketball for years to come. Momentum, attention, and strategy. This was more than a league. It was a test of adaptability in real time, with stakes higher than any single season or game.